Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. I got to be completely honest with you. We're in a really tough spot as African-American people. Trump being in office and doing what he's doing, which is implementing Project 2025, having hired the people that he has hired and has placed in these offices throughout the federal government, is the very reason why I spent most of 2024 reading and making multiple videos about Project 2025. Because I knew, being a civil rights lawyer, and then reading their playbook, which they put online, that if they got back in office, it would be horrible for African-American people. Because I knew that we would be the target. We've always been the target. We have always been the target of their animus. This is a fight that has been going on here on the continental United States of America for 4 centuries. It has never let up. It has never let up. When we get tired, they're fighting. When we need a break, they're fighting and planning and plotting. When we get weary, they're still fighting. They don't quit. They don't sleep. And I'm saying this because we need to be as tenacious. We need to be as tenacious. We cannot slow up, rest. We can't do that. Because when we do that, that gives them the opportunity to get even further ahead of us. Now, this video, I want to talk to you about how Trump is gutting, absolutely gutting, the office in the Department of Justice that has the responsibility of enforcing voter rights laws. All right, so let's go to another screen. And I want to read some parts of this for you. This is a CNN article. It says, the title is, Inside Trump's Gutting of the Justice Department Unit That Enforces Voting Laws. Now, none of this really even surprises me because, again, I read Project 2025. I knew what they would do. They spelled it out. Yet, over 2 million black people voted for Trump. Now, that's the facts. Those are the numbers. Over 2 million black people voted for Trump, and millions more did not vote. Millions more of eligible black voters didn't vote. And I'm going to keep saying that and saying that and saying that because voting has consequences. Elections have consequences. So this article says the Justice Department's unit tasked with enforcing federal voting laws is down from roughly 30 attorneys to about a half a dozen, about 6, as most of its career staff has departed in the face of escalating pressure tactics from the Trump administration. So the career attorneys in this office, who knows how to enforce voting rights laws were forced to leave by the Trump administration. And you see, when I read and hear this sort of stuff, I think about the African-American rappers and entertainers and influencers and pro-black imposters who helped this man get reelected. I can't help but to think about those people. The mass exodus that has whittled the voting section down to a fifth of its normal size came after a relentless campaign by the department's political leaders to smear the work of the longtime attorneys, dismiss non-controversial cases, and reassign career supervisors. They said that they were going to do every bit of this in Project 2025. They talked about getting rid of what they coined the deep state so that they could put in Trump loyalists. And I knew that once those people got in, once they took place of these career attorneys and career federal employees, they would implement Project 2025. Assistant Attorney General Harmit Dillon, the Trump appointee who oversees the Civil Rights Division, which houses the DOJ voting section, has joked about how the division has emptied out. More than 200 attorneys from the division, often called the crown jewel of the department, took a buyout offered by the administration. The Voting Rights Office that enforces the voting rights law was known for decades as the crown jewel of the Department of Justice because it fought for voting rights, which at one time was at least acceptable even for the GOP. And then what happened? I'll tell you in a few minutes. During Donald Trump's first term, DOJ officials forced voting section attorneys to abandon the more high-profile work that had often been opposed by conservatives. But the gutting of the section during Trump's second administration goes far beyond that, according to former department attorneys and outside voter advocates. So they've taken it another step. They did this in Trump's first term, but they have taken it to a whole nother level in the first 100 or so days of his second term. And this goes on to say, we are seeing many more people at this point, after many, many years of experience, leave the division, said Thomas Soares. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, the president of the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. That is obviously more devastating because the work that's going to be done by them is going to be more clearly anti-voting rights and frankly done by less experienced people. So they will use the least experienced person in the DOJ to handle these cases so that those people who don't know what they're doing can mess up these cases intentionally. The Justice Department has already dropped challenges to Republican-drawn redistricting maps and GOP-backed election laws. In other words, the racial gerrymandering that southern states have been doing are not being challenged now because the Trump administration has replaced those career prosecutors and attorneys, civil rights attorneys, constitutional law attorneys who knew and understood voting rights laws and had a conviction to protect voting rights. Well, they're gone now because the Trump administration pressured them. So racial gerrymandering will not be challenged, and GOP-backed voter suppression laws will not be challenged. And what is it that we have coming up in a year and a half? the 2026 midterms. What do we have coming up 2 years after that? The 2028 presidential election. And that's assuming that there even be voting a year and a half from now, 3.5 years from now. Anyway, as well as lawsuits that allege black voters in small communities had been discriminated against by long-standing local voting systems, the administration is abandoning pre-existing cases brought under the Voting Rights Act as the 1965 civil rights law is under legal attack, with a new appeals court ruling foreclosing private enforcement of its main provision in a large swath of the country. I did a video on that just about a month ago, when I believe the Eighth Circuit ruled that private individuals cannot sue under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. It must be done, the suit must be brought by who? The Department of Justice. And what are they doing? Gutting the office. It's just absolutely amazing what we have been dealing with here. So let's take a step back and let's look at how we got here. For most of our time here, we couldn't even vote. We were chattel property. We could not say who we wanted to represent us because, again, our ancestors were enslaved. Well, after the Civil War, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were added to the Constitution. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment gave us citizenship rights, which they're currently trying to change. The 14th Amendment also gave us due process rights, which they're trying to avoid, and equal protection rights. And the 15th Amendment gave us the right to vote. But there was no enforcement mechanism to ensure that right. And after Reconstruction ended, Southern states enacted black code laws which created Jim Crow. And so despite the 15th Amendment, we couldn't vote still because of poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, all sorts of things, violence. So when we see these folks fighting for our right to vote, it was because of all of the Jim Crow voter suppression laws. And then, of course, in the 60s, the 50s, the civil rights movement arose and challenged those Jim Crow black code laws. And our people, along with some whites, literally died for our right to vote, gave their lives so that we, you and me, could vote. And their deaths mean something. We should respect and honor their death. They mean something, despite how some blacks dismiss their deaths. I heard Ice Cube, I heard Dr. Claude Anderson belittle their deaths. Essentially say, well, they didn't leave the house that morning when they died to go die for voting rights, as if that matters. They gave their lives in the line of duty. They gave their lives so that we could have these rights that we now take for granted. Dr. King and many others were beaten. John Lewis, beaten. Hit upside his head, beaten. These people stood up for us so that we could have these rights. And we're losing them. We're using the very thing that they fought to give us, the right to vote. We're either not using it or we're using it to vote in the people who wants to take away our rights to vote. Do you see, this is nonsensical stuff that's going on right now. And I guess the biggest thing that I do as a civil rights attorney is just bring some common sense back to this theater, this political theater, to this ongoing civil rights movement, if you will. Just bring some common sense back to it. That's what I do, because there's so much nonsense out there. But anyway, because of them, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. And what it did was it gave teeth to the 15th Amendment, enforcement teeth. Because as part of the Voting Rights Act, Congress gave the Attorney General the responsibility of protecting voting rights, of fighting against racial discrimination, against the poll taxes, the literacy test, the racial gerrymandering, and so on. And one of the biggest things that the Voting Rights Act did, it no longer does that, and I'll tell you why in just a second, is that it required those southern states and some of the other ones to have to get approval from the Department of Justice before they made any changes to their voting rights laws, because they had a tendency to enact voter suppression laws. So they had to get pre-approval from the DOJ. Some of those attorneys who have now quit. Well, that requirement, that provision, that section of the Voting Rights Act was gutted in 2013 in a case called Shelby County versus Holder. So now those southern states don't have to do that. They can implement any sort of voter suppression law that they want to, basically. And all that's left is Section 2. And it, too, has been weakened considerably. As I told you earlier in this video, the 8th Circuit, I believe it's the 8th Circuit, even ruled that private people, private citizens, could not sue under Section 2, the last remaining enforcement section of the Voting Rights Act. Private individuals cannot sue under that section anymore. It must be done by the Department of Justice, which is clearly hostile to black voting rights. Now, Shelby County, that case was handed down by SCOTUS in 2013. Why? Because of the election of Barack Obama, which occurred in 2008. You see, Barack Obama he scared white people in America because they said, essentially, they're taking over our country. They got a black man elected. How did we let this happen? And they said, aha, it's because of the voting rights law. It's because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We got to gut it. We got to do something about it. And so they handed down the Shelby County versus Holder case. And over the past few years, they then attacked Section 2. And now with Trump in office, gutting the actual office that Congress tasked with protecting voting rights, they're now essentially turning their backs on the voting rights of African Americans primarily altogether. So it's been one attack after another attack, after another attack, after another attack on what? Voting. Voting. Why? Why have they so unrelentingly attacked voting? Simple. Because voting helped us elect people who championed our causes. Voting enabled to keep out of office enabled us to use our voice, our vote, our power to keep white supremacists out of office. That's why it's so disheartening that 2 million black people would turn around 60 years after the Voting Rights Act and vote for a white supremacist in a white supremacist movement. What has happened? Well, I'll share what happened in just a second. So those people, we vote those people in, they get in and they champion our causes. But if you listen to some influencers, some pro-black imposters, some black conservatives, they say that those blacks that we have elected over the past 60 years have done nothing for black people. Have done nothing for black people is what they say. Despite all the things that they have done from Joe Biden on backward. I made a video not long ago stating simply, just based on the facts, that Joe Biden was he accomplished the most for blacks since LBJ. You just go look it up. Billions in HBCU funding, billions in student loan forgiveness. I put a video on TikTok, on Instagram. I was blown away by all the black people who said, Biden forgave my loans, Biden forgave my loans, Biden forgave my loans. All the black people who came on my video, TikTok and Instagram, and said, Biden forgave my loans. They also, him and Harris also gave out record amounts of small business administration loans to blacks, even some with criminal felony records. The lowest black unemployment rate in American history under Biden. Lowest black child poverty rate in history, American history, under Biden. These are just the facts. You can like him, you can dislike him, you can say he didn't have his right mind, you can read Jake Tapper's book, you can do what you want to do, but those are the facts. You can go look that up. And no American president, including Barack Obama, accomplished all of that since LBJ. And that's not taking anything from Barack Obama, because he too did a lot for the African American community. But he faced unprecedented obstruction from Mitch McConnell and the rest of them. And some of you like to say, well, he had control of the White House, of Congress, so why didn't he do even more? Because he had his trifecta for a short period of time, and his focus at that time was health care. And as a result of him focusing on health care, millions of black people today have health care. And and how important is that? It's very important, because if your health is messed up, you can't do anything. Yet you got these negative black folks out here who love to tear down anything that we try to do to improve our community. I mean, it's like that's what they just focus on, just tearing down. He ain't did nothing for us. He ain't did nothing for us. She ain't no good. She ain't did nothing for us. She's never done anything for us. Can they do more? Can they do better? Yes. But don't discount what they have done despite the opposition that they face. These folks who are tearing down everything that blacks in Congress or and these agencies are trying to do, they act as if there is no white opposition. Obama had unprecedented opposition as being the first black president. They fought him tooth and nail. They were determined that Obama would not accomplish anything if it was left up to them. Yet these pro-black imposters, these black conservatives, they attack anybody who has done any good for black people. They attacked LBJ. They assassinated Lincoln. They said Obama wasn't a citizen. Him and Michelle had to walk the straight and narrow. There's no way they could have done anything, all the stuff, put it that way, that Trump has done. And they constantly tear him down, tear him down, tear him down. And any other black person that's trying to do anything for us, what do? Tear him down, tear him down, tear him down. There ain't no good, there ain't no good, there ain't no good. All over social media, all the time, tearing down the movement that is still in place fighting for black rights. Their attack on voting has been unrelenting. I'm talking about black people. Some content creators. They are out here saying voting has done nothing for black people. And it is silly. It is a silly statement. We have the rights we have today because of voting. And you see, when we don't vote, we get Trump. When we don't vote, we get a barrage of white supremacy. When we don't vote, we lose precious rights. When we don't vote, we got to see voting as a defensive shield against white supremacy. Because in many instances, that's what it is. That's what I told people this past election. Kamala may not be your ideal choice. The Democratic Party may not do as much as you want them to do. But the posture that we needed to take this past election was to keep out Project 2025, Trump, MAGA, all of that whole space. Keep it out of power because they're coming for us. And just think about it. If voting has done nothing for blacks, if voting is not important, why have our adversaries fought our right to vote so hard? Just use your common sense and just ask yourself that question. If you are in a fight with someone and someone hands you a stick to fight with, and you're using that stick to fight back and you're making some gains, and then your so-called buddy tells you in your ear that that stick is not helping you, and you then throw away your stick listening to your buddy, and then you start getting beat down, what would you think? That this is not really a friend who told me to let my stick down. Well, it's the same with voting. Because the first thing that the person you were fighting did was took your stick. That was the first thing they did. That's what they were trying to do. Get that stick out of your hand. Well, see, voting is that stick. Voting is what we use not only to advance our agenda, but sometimes just to block their agenda. So had those 2 million blacks voted for Kamala Harris, despite her not being some of your best candidate, at least we wouldn't be dealing with this. At least we would not be dealing with 4 years of anti-blackness. Folks, some of this is just really common sense. It is. And it's also a matter of who you listen to. Who are you getting your information from? Are you reading? Are you researching? You know, a lot of the younger people, they love TikTok. They love Instagram, YouTube. And they're listening to these influencers who are misleading them, who are filling their heads up with disinformation, and it's costing our people dearly. We must use our common sense. We must use horse sense. I mean, that's just common sense. Again, if you're in a fight, someone gave you a stick. The stick is helping you keep your opponent off you and helping you beat that opponent down. And then a so-called friend says to you, that stick is not helping you. And you know it's helping you. Yet they're in your head saying the stick is not helping you. Throw it down. Don't use it. And you follow them and then start getting your head beat on. Common sense should tell you, you have been misled by a so-called friend. And you need to take that person's advice with a grain of salt going forward. All right. So they're busy fighting us tooth and nail. And it's bad. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's bad. This is why I warned us. Don't do this. We do have the 2026 midterms coming. And we need to now, right now, be working on getting people out to vote so that we can at least stop this racist anti-black agenda from being fully implemented, although they're trying to get it all done or as much as possible before the midterms. So keep your ears up. I'm going to be starting a 2026 midterm campaign called Boots on the Ground. I will be giving you more information. And oh, by the way, please support our work on Substack. I just opened or just created a Substack account, put up my first article yesterday. Support us over on TikTok. Support us on Instagram. Help us get the word out, because I'm doing everything I can to empower and to help our community. And by the way, I hadn't heard anyone really do this story on voting rights. A lot of you all love to listen to the white the progressive media outlets, which is fine, but they're not going to focus on our issues because those are not their issues. Our issues, voting rights and all of that, that's us. That's not them, even white progressives. You're going to get that from here. And you're going to get that from other channels like Roland Martin and Ben Dixon. You're going to get it from those channels. All right. So anyway, thank you for watching this video. I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Remember, stay woke.